Welcome to the XY Advisor Podcast, a global community of financial advisors sharing and learning with one another to drive the positive evolution of financial advice. To get involved, go to xyadvisor.com or simply download the XY Advisor app. Hub24 is on a mission to empower advisors to deliver better financial futures for their clients. They are dedicated to customer service excellence and delivering innovative product solutions that create value for advisors and their clients. These are just some of the reasons why advisors rate them number one for overall satisfaction and why their managed portfolio solution has been rated best in market 5 years running. Hub24 believes nothing happens in isolation. So they're working together with advisors, licensees, and industry leaders to leverage their data and technology expertise to help solve key challenges in the delivery of financial advice, so more Australians can access cost-effective advice. Welcome back to the XY Advisor Podcast. I'm Fraser Jack, and today I'm talking to Rob Jones from Peloton Partners. G'day, Rob.
Hey, Fraser. How are you? And thanks for having me on.
Very good, thank you. Thank you for coming on. Now, let's give the listeners a quick overview of Peloton Partners.
Thanks, Fraser. Yeah, Peloton, we're a consulting business effectively to financial planning companies, large and small. So single advice practices through to very large practices, multidisciplinary practices. And we help them focus on their pricing frameworks and pricing advice correctly.
Fantastic. Now let's get into the Rob part. Tell us about Rob. How did Rob get into this position or financial advice, financial services?
It's a little bit different, Fraser, to be truthful with you. So I started my career. I started commerce at uni way back in the day, and after I think I was in second year or third year, I can't remember now, but I broke my leg quite severely, and I ended up having to do a lot of rehab in hospital, and I started living with a mate of mine who was a policeman in Victoria, and as I was rehabbing and having to do a bucket load of work to rehabilitate. I did well at uni, so I was able to defer and all that type of stuff, but I had to get my leg back under control. And in doing so, living with this guy and seeing how excited he was to go to work every day and loved what he was doing, I thought, gee, that sounds interesting. And because I had to do a lot of training, I thought, well, why don't I give it a go? A very odd thing. And so I did. So that was back in 1991, and I spent 10 years with Victoria Police and loved every minute of it. I did general duties like everyone does, so uniform, out there on the streets doing what police do. I also did some undercover work for a little while. I did plainclothes work, and then I transitioned to a detective and spent a few years catching some genuinely good can I say clients or crooks? I mean, I talk about my clients these days, Fraser, but back then they were my clients or customers. So I spent 10 years doing that, absolutely loved it, and never planned to leave, actually, because I'd hit my mark of wanting to be a detective and then enjoying what I was doing, but I bumped into a fellow who owned a financial planning business, and he was actually ex-SAS. So he was in the SAS in Australia. And so it was a bizarre thing because it was by accident that we came together and we got to know each other a little bit. And he said, didn't have a family at the time. He did. And he said, hey, listen, I could really do with someone with your sort of organisational skills and capability. I've got a small financial planning practice. We've got, 9 staff here in Melbourne. And he invited me to come on board, whatever that meant, as a general manager. I had no idea. Even though I studied commerce, I didn't understand financial planning at all, had no idea about superannuation, et cetera, et cetera. But I took a leap of faith. I could always go back into the force. That's the nature of the beast. They'd take you back in a heartbeat. But true to my nature, I decided once I left that was it. I was going to focus on something and give my heart and soul. And I'm really glad. And it's been 20 years to the day that I joined effectively or left the force and joined a small financial planning practice. And, that sort of transition was challenging at the time. But, a lot of people have asked, well, how do you do that? And it's funny because I've always been okay at making decisions. That's the nature of the beast. Under pressure, under stress, making effective decisions with limited amount of information, managing risks like when we talk about risks in a financial planning sense, but the risks I had to deal with were environmental, legislative, regulatory, evidentiary, you name it, forensic, a whole series of risks. So for us, risk management in the force was something very, very significant because lives were at stake. And I remember the last job I ever did before I left, literally weeks before I started in financial planning, I had a team of, and I was only a young fellow, 28 at the time, I had a team of 127 police, and I was raiding 30 properties simultaneously, and the organisation for that is extensive, and it was a big criminal network we were sweeping up. And then I walked into a small financial planning office, and I had to deal with a workflow issue on the first day, and a couple of staff not getting along with each other too well. And I thought, what have I done?
Yeah. So it's interesting, isn't it? Because obviously there's a heck of a lot of structure and discipline in those initial training, and also I reckon the ability to ask really good questions and quality questions probably came out of that first 10 years of working, as you said, in the force. And I like what you said around that we all transition. Well, back in that time, there was a lot of transitioning from other careers into financial advice because it wasn't always the thing that was promoted with your commerce degree, which is very different to now, I guess. But and then work. So tell me about that time when you walked in with your mate who was an ex-SAS. I don't know what to call them, ex-SAS, and then tell me about walking into that practice and then working there for the first sort of 12 months, getting to doing your apprenticeship, if you like, again.
No, great question. Look, it was so new and it was so unstructured in my world. I thought, to be honest, Fraser, I thought I was walking into something that it'll blow my mind away. Professional business, Collins Street in Melbourne. I'll be on the steepest learning curve. I won't be able to add value. I had actually a fair bit of self-doubt, to be perfectly blunt with you, and I just wasn't sure what was going on. And so I decided that I'll do as much research as I can. I'm a classic investigator. You research everything, you get your facts understood, but walking in there and seeing we had a single office. There was 4 advisors. We had a paraplanner. We had your typical client service team members and a receptionist, and that was the structure of the business. The owner had a very flamboyant individual who could be described as, he's brilliant, but a little bit erratic in one sense because he just brought stuff in and clients were coming in non-stop. And the business for me when I walked in was almost chaotic. There was stuff going on everywhere. There were clients to be seen. There were these things called SOAs to be prepared. There was some internal pressure amongst people saying, I need this particular piece of work and I'm not ready to get it done. There were all sorts of stuff. And I suppose I threw myself in. I started to work out what superannuation was, what providing financial advice was. And in fact, one of my first real lessons, ironically, was around pricing, Fraser, because I was actually photocopying for 3 days our review reports that were going out to clients. And that was a bizarre thing. I literally stood at a photocopy and one of my detective mates ran me and said, oh, gee, what's it like in business? I said, I've been on my feet for about 13 hours straight photocopying. And he's gone, hang on a minute, last week you were putting bracelets on crooks and going to the Supreme Court and giving evidence and blah, blah, blah in murder trials. And here you are photocopying. I said, yeah, but it was in that photocopying that I learned a lot. And I started to look through cash accounts for clients and seeing these fees coming through was really bizarre. And the reason I mention it is it's so prophetic because it was 20 years ago almost to the day. And I remember seeing this just confusion, all these fees that fluctuated all the time every month. There was no rhythm to it, no symmetry to it, no structure to it, and I couldn't get my head around it. And so I asked the question of the advisors and the owners at the time, well, listen, what's going on with this? I can't get my head around it. Oh, Rob, it's quite simple. You know, clients have this thing called funds under management, FUM, and what happens is the platform takes the start of the month and the end of the month. They get the average of the FUM. We then apply this thing called 1%. That's what we charge our clients. I'll get on to why in a moment, but we charge them 1.1%, and then the fee gets calculated that way. And I said, but why does it change all the time? Oh, well, money can come in, money can go out, people can withdraw some, there's pension payments to be made, there's super contribution. It was all over the place, and I was still confused, very confused as I started to sort of unwrap, well, what's this business actually do for people? What services it provide? What does it charge for those services? And I just couldn't get the connection at all. Even back then, I struggled with it. And I actually said, literally in my first week or two, do we need to follow a model like this? Because how do we know it's right or fair? And how do we manage a business when it changes so frequently? I said, oh, well, that's what we do. That's what everyone does.
That's what we've always done, right?
So shut up, Rob, and just do what everyone does. So I fell in line.
I find this really interesting that you've come at that from a consumer point of view.
Yeah,
so both as as you mentioned, the investigator, which I'm going to get to a bit later on in our conversation because I know that's still inside of you.
Oh yeah.
But that's you've approached this from a consumer saying, well, if it's confusing for a consumer, then
I felt challenged by it, Fraser, and I then, because I was photocopying all these files, I kept looking at these different clients, and I was trying to work out in my mind, well, if they're different and the only difference I can see is how much money they've got, and then this fairness thing came. I don't know. It was just one of those things. Like the logic of it didn't make sense to me. I had a real problem with it so I kept asking questions all the time, and they probably got annoyed. But at the same time, I think it actually challenged them a lot. They started to go, well, oh, you're right. And one of the things I struggled with the most was one client in particular. I'll never forget it. We photocopied the review report. The client was coming up for their review meeting in a week or two's time, and normally we'd send it out first and come in and they'd have a chat about it. But in that intervening period between preparing it and the client coming in for the review, they had a windfall of $500,000 or thereabouts that was going in. So we put that in. It went into the same portfolio that the client already had, distributed into the same managed funds that were sitting inside that portfolio. But we made an extra $5,000 out of it because it was $500,000, and at 1%, that's what it meant. And I knew that in my head was, well, does it take us $5,000 to pretty much just invest the same amount of money? Now, back there, not generating an SOA or an ROA and all the trouble you have to go through, you didn't have to do a hell of a lot at the time. So the money went in, and I thought, gee, the client, we just made an extra $5,000, but have we actually done something? I wasn't trying to get on a moral high horse, Fraser, anything like that. It was more just trying to get an understanding of what the hell is happening here.
Yep.
And why should that scenario exist when it really has no logic to it, because we didn't employ any more people. We were just making more money. That was it.
Yep. So so if we then work out where did you go from there? I guess how did you then think about what could a fee model look like?
Well, I sort of took the general manager role. Then I was asked. I'd sort of tried to make a few changes in the business, and I think I was okay at some things I did. And they asked me to come on board as a director, and then I became a part owner of the business, and we started to then grow. But the thing that we then did was because no one was ready at the time. There's no such thing as a fixed fee back then, Fraser. It really, well, there probably was, but it didn't exist in a financial planning sense to any degree at all. Every firm I spoke to on the exposures that I had to other firms was all the same, pretty much 1%. But then we brought in the tiered fee model, which was probably the next major shift, if you like, of that business around fee. We brought in the 1.1, we tiered it down, and I felt a little bit better because I thought, well, okay, we're not necessarily penalising people who are successful and wealthy and penalising their wealth, which was what I thought we were doing. We're actually, accommodating, if you like, but there was still a disconnect even from that. But at least it was a little bit better than just applying an arbitrary flat percentage of fund. And the other thing that struck out, sorry to interrupt, the other thing that stuck out at the time too was that there were clients who, we use this, or some advisors often say to me now, Rob, this client's simple needs client, or their circumstances are simple. That was the other big lesson for me. The more I started to deal personally with some of the clients, I never advised them. I was the owner, runner, I was running the business, CEO, etc. But I did spend a lot of time with clients and talking about things and got to know a hell of a lot of them. And then I realised, gosh, there's a lot of differences between people. Their motivations are different. Their needs are different. Their financial literacy, financial acumen is different. Some seemed to be really, really complex because historically that's what had happened. They had all these different trusts and family trust accounts and et cetera, whereas others were quite basic. And that was, I suppose, part of that journey then of understanding, well, hang on a minute, there's more than just a number difference here. There's actual differences in human beings and what motivates them and what their core reason for advice might be. And so I started exploring that a bit further, eventually going down a segmentation sort of process, if you like, to try and even connect closer to the differences that clients were presenting with, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and to be able to uncover a lot more of that information and then to be able to keep that information in the system.
You bet, because I in the force we used to use the terminology around, it was called antecedent information. So basically, if I saw someone on the street that I'd sort of known was perhaps a little bit shady, we'd stop them, and if they were criminal, we would basically fill out what was called an antecedent report. Why are they out at a certain time? What were they wearing? How do they like to speak and engage? What are their likes and dislikes? As bizarre as that may sound, from a policing point of view, that is so relevant. So I started to think a lot about, well, how do we capture information about clients? How do we transfer that information internally amongst ourselves? How do we keep the client? How do we show them that they are so important to us that we know everything about them? And irrespective of whether we have to change an advisor and in and out, we're going to carry this sort of important personal information through, including their fears and anxieties. And that was a big thing for the firm at the time to understand, because they were going, well, hang on a minute, we've just got this bit about that's their cash flow, they need this, they need that. But for me, it was more that connecting stuff that made a lot of sense, because I'd saw it in the force, I used it all the time, and we could go to crimes sometimes and I could see footwear imprints and know exactly which crook it is, or know how they were initiating their particular brand of an offence of breaking into a home. So I always felt that collection of that information, sharing it, having it understood was something that was lacking in this business, and that's part of my little mission, was to solve that.
Yeah, I'm sort of a little bit on that mission with you, and that sort of dovetails into, I guess, the idea of, goals and values-based financial advice, and being able to then say, well, I now understand what your internal motivations are to be able to, to want those sort of things. Let's get back to your journey. So you're an owner and manager in that practice. Where to from there?
So we spent, that was 2001 through to 2008. In 2008, the business made a decision that we would merge with Shadforth Financial Group, SFG. So that group of companies, around the country. And to be honest, mate, I having spent 7 years and getting used to this industry in only one firm, boy, that sort of opened the eyes up. So with these 13 firms, we did a merger. It was a script-for-script merger, no cash at the time. And it was basically a like-for-like comparison. And it was my first initiation into comparing yourself to others and having a look at similarities, but also picking up differences. And I naively thought, and I was probably pretty naive at the time and insular, because I was only dealing with the firm that I was engaged with and owned a little bit of, I thought we'd all be quite similar at a pricing level, at a service level, at a profit and loss level. And yet it was the opposite. These 13 firms were incredibly different. Even though we were delivering this essentially the same service and similar product, we were so different across so many different levels. There were so many legacies to deal with. There was a huge learning curve, and it was at SFG that I was asked to sort of, and it was a state-based business with a national team, and I was asked to run a project across all firms, a pricing one. And I'll never forget the CEO, who is now sadly passed away a few years back. But at the time, he said to me, hey, listen, Rob, what I want you to do is I want to take, and they'd sort of, I suppose they thought I was reasonably okay at the pricing piece itself. So they said to me, could you please... And he was walking out of the room when he said it. Rob, we need to make some more money for a start as a business, because we're not as profitable as we should be. That was number one. Number two was, we need to get everyone on the same page. Can you go and organise that and synchronise pricing? Now, we had 16,000 clients. We had, a huge amount of money we were managing. We had so many different client profiles. We had different firms and different experiences. And we had, in amongst those firms, I reckon, there had to be 20, 25 different variations of advice fees. So we had to unravel. So my job was to unravel it all, build something that was going to, one, deliver the business a level of profit that it could at least predict from year in, year out as best it possibly could, better than where it was. Two, synthesise that across all clients. And then we had to manage the project of moving those 16,000 clients across. It was massive, because, some clients had to come down in price, some had to go up in price. There was all of this going on. But in 8 months, we actually did it as a business. It was one of the most profound things that I think SFG has ever done, was to represent to all those clients, was to bring a synchronised pricing framework, implement that framework, and then get on with the job of advising clients.
Yeah, for those listeners who don't know the Shadforth story, essentially, as you said, those 13 firms came together. and had to have their say in what their investment philosophy was and what their goals-based philosophy was, and everybody had to have a bit of a say, and everybody had to do the negotiating to see what was going to be the best of breed out of those 13 firms.
Yes,
which is not an easy task. We all know that, and I think the catchphrase at the time was, "We're not going to argue over the color of the coffee cups," or something. Was that it?
Spot on. It was, talk about egos, and we've all got them, Fraser, I suppose, but we had some monumental egos. And I think one of the good things about that was we decided a lot of the egos wanted their particular brand of advice to be the one. Because, we've been doing it for 30 years and it's bloody fantastic. I mean, this is the way it should be. But as it turned out, we were confronted by that. So the best way we did it was the CEO who did this, by the way, and it was a brilliant move. He just simply said, "Oh, well, that's okay. Why don't we just grab you and put you all in the room?" And there's nothing like putting sometimes the egos to work and actually saying, "Well, now you're going to produce something. I know you're good on the talk and you've been great builders of your businesses, but we now need you to actually do some work. So we'd like you to reimagine a value proposition. We'd like you to start from scratch. We'd like to forget all the prejudice that everyone has had and all the experience you've had, and actually let's build it from the client experience upwards this time, and let's go from that rather than down. So what does it look like? And if we're starting today, how would we invest? How would we charge? What service do we provide? What would you like that client experience to be?" That was the beginning of the unravelling of both the egos, I suppose, but the bringing together of synchronicity around all the key elements. And again, it didn't happen overnight for sure. It took probably the best part of 2 years, but it came together in the end, and it was really powerful.
Yeah, when you say synchronized pricing and synchronicity, and within those 13 firms, I'm thinking of a synchronized swimming team coming together and all for me. That was my visual. I'm like, that's not an easy task either. That's a really hard thing to do.
Legs and arms everywhere, Fraser, flying all over the place. Talks that aren't the same as well, probably.
Yeah, fantastic. And so how long were you at Shadforth for? How long did you stay there?
So between 2008 and 2012, 4.5 years, and about sort of midway through that period, Tony Fenning, the CEO at the time, asked me to sort of then take on a national role around mergers and acquisitions. Now, I'd had a tiny bit of experience. I won't say at the time that I was, but I had a little bit of experience in firstly rolling up all of the money managers, the firm I was initially employed by, those entities, and then dealing with all the transaction documents and so forth. And we did set up a couple of other companies at the time, money managers, but it was pulling all of that together. So I had some experience, but not a lot. But then I got to this great opportunity to meet so many different firms then who were interested in the SFG Shadforth story, who were potentially targets of SFG to acquire. And Fraser, I during that time, I can't tell you how many I looked at, but it was at least 300 firms. And my job, it was pretty confusing too, right? Confronting. I had to come up with a way to work out what would be a good firm to buy and what is not a good firm to buy by definition. So I decided to build my own little internal assessment matrix, benchmark, if you want to call it. And then I basically lined all of the 13 initial SFG firms together and looked at all their metrics. Then I combined them as a single group, and then I basically measured every single firm against this. But it was in doing that and in speaking to the owners of these firms that you realised, and something really profoundly struck me. One of them was some of them actually don't know their business well at all. In fact, and I don't think this is an awful thing to say, their knowledge of their own practice, its financial history, current performance, future trajectory was very poor. And in fact, we had worked out a way that we could see that same business reimagined, I suppose. And it's a really profound thing, this, because this is what led to Peloton coming into being. I at one stage, I'll never forget, sitting across the table from some owners towards the end of my career. I'd sort of worked out at SFG, I'd sort of worked out what I wanted to do. And I'll be honest, I always wanted to have my own thing at some point, but I just didn't have the experience till then. But during that time, sitting around and actually having a check that I was authorised to pay for a firm, which in my mind was clearly $2 to $3 million less than what they should have received, had they just done a little bit of work in renovating their own practice, sorting a couple of things out, which would have been at minimal cost to them. Maybe it might have taken an extra 12 months or so, but that's it. And they could have had that extra amount. Now, my job was to buy for my shareholders at the lowest possible price. But I thought to myself, well, hang on a minute, if I keep coming across this, what on earth is happening out there? And the other thing is, I suppose I got to see so many different firms and so many different scenarios where some of the owners were struggling with those decisions they had to make. Some businesses were small, unstructured, other businesses large and had culture problems. And I started to think very deeply about, I don't know, I think I'd like to go out and help them. I think there's a business there. I'll be honest, it was taking a hell of a lot of risk because I didn't do any further research than that. But when I think about it, I did a lot of research. I had 300 firms to look at. I had all of their problems we were trying to work through and get ahead in our mind. Well, if we had them in our business, what would that business then look like? And I think we were okay at projecting that. And that sort of started, if you like, the thinking about, I think it's time I go and I think it's time I do something to really tap into the passion that I have. And that is to actually help the owners and businesses of financial planners, believing that will actually help the end client as well.
Yep. Yeah, fantastic.
That's the nexus. That's my DNA in a way, I suppose.
That's such an interesting story. It really just come back down to the, your love of finance and money and numbers and the numbers nerd part of you,
Yes.
combined with the investigator piece where you're actually digging in and asking the questions and finding out and getting underneath which is generally often a people business first. I think
Yes.
I find a lot of our financial planning firms, they're a people business first. They're there for their clients and their staff and even somewhat the lifestyle, and then the numbers tend to come second, which is interesting. Obviously, it's like the plumber with the leaky tap, right?
Spot on. You've just hit it on the head. Look, not jumping right now to where we are, but I have this sort of catchphrase in Peloton that our sole job, and I just spoke to a new firm yesterday morning, and I said to them, at the end of the day, our job is quite simple. It's an equation that sounds simple, and that is to establish and maintain a right fee for the client, right return for a business. I found too often, as you just pointed out, the business actually came second. We kept promoting our clients are first and all this type of stuff, but some of these firms, Fraser, are actually, in some distress. And that stress manifests then in their behaviour, and their behaviour often goes to culture, and culture goes to turnover of staff. And we do a little measurement on culture, and it's amazing how much the numbers do tell a story. And without speaking to owners, if we get their data, I can actually get a read on their culture really quickly by assessing their longevity of team members and other bits and pieces. And it's a really profound thing. And often it stems from, I've looked after the clients, I think, well, I'm paying my staff well, but I'm not paying myself very well at all. And I don't think I'm building a sustainable practice. And that, again, is part of the DNA of Peloton as well, was to rectify that and bring balance back. It's not about promoting the business over the client nor the client over the business. It's about that equal objective of delivering a great service but getting paid exactly what you should be paid, what you deserve, what you ought to have, and just making sure that is the predominant strategy.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, tell me about that initial starting your own business, because obviously a consulting business to financial advisors is very similar to a financial advice business with clients. You started up, you had to go and find clients. Tell us about how you went and did that.
Well, I had to convince my wife first, mate, and I'll be honest with you, that was tough. I was fortunate that my business partner, co-founder Michael Harrison, came with me, and both of us shared a very similar passion, and together we built Peloton, and we were starting there with an empty sheet. And I suppose I was thinking, this will be great. I'll have all these clients. I'm sure they'll come to us. They need what we do. And I was wrong, obviously. We started well. We did a little bit of here and there, but we didn't actually start delivering what we are delivering right now for some time. It just didn't happen straight away because I don't think we're on song. I don't think we had that product, if I can use the word loosely, properly understood and ready to go. But we did little projects here and there for some firms. We started to slowly build a bit of a reputation. We were never a coach, Fraser. We're not. There are some coaches in this industry. I looked at all that. We decided, because we were good at execution, and yeah, it does go back to my policing days. I'd love to solve crime. It was one of my absolute joys in life, was to go in and solve something. The only way you did that was execution, not executing people, of course, but execution of the arrest strategy.
Shout
of
out
the
to the Victorian Police Department.
Yeah. Oops.
Sorry, force.
Yeah. Yes, but it was about execution, Fraser, and I felt that if as a coach, I'd be hopeless because I'd want to get in all the time and start being hands-on, because I can't stand hey, I went away to this conference, felt good for a couple of days, and suddenly I've lost all momentum. And as an advisor truthfully said to me, the same one yesterday or the day before, when he said, I actually, Rob, don't know where to start. I know I want to do something. I know I have to do something, but I don't know where to start. And so it was, we always set it up to be execution focused, that we weren't going to just say, here's what to do, tell me what to do. It's, here's what to do, here's the why of why you should be doing it, here's the process of doing it. And by the way, we can also do it for you, because and the minute we did that, and the minute we started to build that reputation as being able to execute and implement, it just changed everything, Fraser. And we went from, looking after one or two clients to where we are today. But I must say, we're not a mass market coaching business at all. We only deal with effectively 12 to 15 to 20 firms maximum a year, because what we do is very intense and it takes a lot of manpower. And and because we need so much focus on it, we are not a big mass market coaching business. We are a specific implementation business, project management business, dealing with something this industry has found terribly challenging: how to value advice, how to position advice, how to price advice, and how to make a sustainable profit from advice. And 8 years later, I'd like to think we've nearly hit the holy grail of getting that right, if I can say that.
And before we get into the products you actually provide, it's kind of like a 12-month to 15 year and a half type program, isn't it? It's like you're not like a let's be together forever. You're we're going to help you get to here, and then you're done. Now,
spot on. And look, once we get them to there, what we've noticed, our first 6 clients, ironically, the first 6 firms we dealt with have all come around and done this again. Even though I say to them, you can actually do it yourself. You've got the structure, you've got the framework. They've wanted to pay us, and we're not cheap, Fraser. We'll talk about that later. But I'd say as an investment, it's incredibly return on investment's huge, but it mightn't seem cheap. But these firms have all come around. They wanted us to do it again, and the reason they came back, and the reason they wanted it, is they wanted the experience again, and they wanted the discipline, and they wanted the framework, and they wanted to be accountable, and they wanted to know that someone was there constantly at their back saying, this has to happen and it's got to happen. It's the only way it does happen. So we'd sort of, our program, if you like, there's I Focus, I Deliver. I won't get into it in real detail, but yes, essentially there's a 15-month program that's in there in the I Deliver, which is all of the doing bit. And that's how long it actually takes to price advice and shift clients and communicate value correctly, Fraser. I don't want to shorten it any less. I live in a world of doing this every day. I don't do broad-based coaching, and I still takes us that long to do it, and proudly so, because the more that we understand a business, we deep dive into it, the more we understand the client, the more the end client, their world, their service, their value, their needs, the better we can price it. And the program itself is powerful because firms can use it over and over again to run their business professionally at that most important bit.
Yep. Yeah, the way I sort of describe it is you do the diagnosis at one part of it, and then the second part you just fix it. It's a bit like taking your car to the mechanic, I suppose. Here's what's wrong with it. Now go and fix it. You could probably teach me how to do it, but it's, like you said, that to do it for you is such a big aspect of busy professionals in any particular profession. It's like, well, I'm here to see clients, I'm here to see patients, I'm here to see, can you just fix that? Yes, I need to fix it. Can you go ahead and do it? So let's dive into those 2 products. The first one's what you call I Focus.
So we used at the time back in 2012 when we set the business up, everything seemed to be I don't know. And we were trying to work out, well, what is it that we actually do? And it actually jumped out really clearly. I mean, I know you might think, gee, he left a business, tried to convince his wife, 4 children, debt, to go and set up a business, and then sort of not really understand what it was. I always understood what I wanted to do. I just didn't have it properly put together. But I Focus came very quickly, and it was as simple as that. The focus must be on the business itself. And look, that program is literally we send out information to a firm, they send it back. I don't get engaged with them at a deep level about the ins and outs and what they've done over time. I learnt my lesson well not to engage in that. Why? And it might seem odd, but you pick up the prejudice of people so profoundly. And I made a mistake actually on one of the first firms we advised. I went and listened to 5 of the owners. It was an accounting and financial planning practice, no names of course, but the accountants were quite dark on the financial planning side, and everyone was blaming each other, and I stupidly got myself engaged in that. And I realised that what I should have just done was looked at the information, interpreted that, presented that. If I got it wrong, I'll die by my sword. If I got it right, they'd be interested in what we had to say and would move forward. So to this day, if I speak to a firm, I might have a 20, 30-minute conversation maximum. But after that, that's it. We send out some information in the iFocus stage. They send that back. It takes us 2 to 3 weeks to properly analyse, put together our advice. Again, we're not dealing with mass clients, so unfortunately it does take a period of time to deal with, but it's a really profound deep dive. It's looking at a business, taking the rose-coloured glasses off, looking at their financial performance historically, looking at their service, their type of clients they support, how elastic their service proposition is, what their pricing framework is currently, what it's done to the financials of the business, pulling back the layers to understand it better, and then reimagining that same business through our lens with the experience that we've got now from the 100 firms that we've dealt with, and giving them a sense of, I suppose, framework, hope, confidence, to be able to project for the very first time perhaps exactly what their future looks like and know how to deal with any changes, whether it's internal changes or changes at the client level. I think these are really powerful things, and iFocus does that. It shines the light on the potential very clearly. I present that then to the owners over a 3 to 4 hour meeting, and then forward them the document that we've prepared for them after that, and that tells everything, right? It's them, and it's not often we've got it wrong. I'd like to think 99% of the time we've actually got it completely right. And sometimes it's very, very challenging for the firm to hear what we have to say. But surely that's the first step of then understanding and then accepting.
And I think the reason, sorry, I'm to interrupt. I think some of the reasons why this is difficult, it actually could be quite difficult for new clients of yours to come on, because they have to then, a lot of businesses are perceived on the outward looking in as, very well structured and built business. But let's face it, there's no perfect business. And so for somebody to say, oh, look, I'm going to let you into the inner sanctum and you can tell me all the things wrong with my business. And I'm thinking that you go in and you look at facts and figures only and discard, by what you said, discard all our good intentions. They haven't happened yet, so we'll just discard them and just look at the raw facts. Sure, they get certainty out of it, but there's a fair bit of falling on your sword, I guess, that has to take place. So tell me how you get like new clients of yours, because this is the same as clients of a financial planner, how they get their mindset in a place where they're willing to do that.
Yeah, great. Another great question. And in fact, I had someone I presented with recently who's been in the industry for a number of years, and she's a fantastic operator, runs a great business, but she actually said to me, I've been hearing you, heard you speak a few times. I've sort of heard of your group generally. And Rob, I'll be perfectly blunt. The reason I haven't come to you guys at this point in time is I actually don't want to hear what you have to tell me. I'm a bit embarrassed. And, that hit me, Fraser, a little bit. And I thought, my God, that's... Now it wasn't, I don't believe it was her ego at all. She's such a terrific person. It was her call that the business is not necessarily in the best shape, and she wasn't necessarily wanting that to be told that. And so we've had to sort of overcome even anyone's fear of going through a process like this, which, yes, can be challenging, but also very positive too. The thing I suppose I would say to anyone listening is, if at all, if at any point that you've sat back there and said, I actually just don't feel that I'm being rewarded necessarily to the extent I should be. I don't feel that I've got the team completely on site with our value and how we go about things and so forth, and I just don't feel it's right for tomorrow's environment or even today's. That should be a trigger to do something, whether it's coming to Peloton or whether it's engaging someone else to help you understand more about what's going on. Whatever you do, just accept that perhaps you might need to swallow a little bit of the pill initially to hear what needs to be said. But in that environment that we're doing that, at the same time, we're actually drawing on, well, now we're going to get over that bit. Let's reimagine. So let's reimagine together. But when I reimagine it for you, it's not some hope thing. It's not some amateur projection based on nothing. I'm going to tell you exactly what's going to happen in the next 12 to 18 months to your cash flow, to your clients, to the time it needs to do something like this, the impact on your business. And it's in that I think creates then the impetus to go, right, I've bitten it. I understand. I can see. I need to do. And that's why I say to them, so we're going to stop that conversation now. We're going to talk about whether you're going to invest in this yourself, do it yourself. I've given you a framework to work to. build that yourself, or do you want us to actually do it for you and implement it for you? That's the end of the iFocus, if you like, and we tell them exactly how we do it. By the way, there's nothing. I don't like to hide anything. I like to give a lot, and I like to say, well, this is what you're going to go through, and we know it works because we've done it many times. If you want to do the same, go through the same steps. Don't shortcut. Don't take I might just do this bit and so forth. If you're fair income about it and you do need to change, and let's look at this regulatory environment. If there's ever a time to get this right, you have no choice, Fraser, but to get it right. It's almost like, and I've been saying the same stuff for 8 years, and no one listened to me back 8 years ago when I talked about this, because everyone was used to the environment at the time, but it was never going to stay that way, So it's the encouragement, I think, to see that there is definitely a really positive light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not just fluff, and it's not just, hey, you're going to walk out of here and you're going to you're going to do all this and make all this money. I don't say any of that. I say this is a framework that needs to be put in. It takes time, effort, energy on both of us, skill, communication, training for advisors. It's a full reset.
Yeah, amazing. So that's the iFocus, and you can work with people just to do the iFocus part, or then you offer them the, do you want us to put it in place for you, make it happen,
correct,
make it become a reality. Talk us through, and you said it, 12 to 15 months. Talk us through that I deliver process.
Thanks. So once the decision is made, I deliver kicks in, and it's 4 phases and quite distinct. The very first thing we do is talk to the team. Then that's where we want to get to know people. That's where we want to get to know their prejudice, their issues, their positive aspects of the business, their personal history. I mean, you talk about it and you said it well, the relevance between, bringing on a financial planner, bringing on a new client. Well, we go through the same process. So we do a lot around meeting with the whole team, receptionists through to the end owners in phase 1. And that takes time. That's an interview process. We do a lot of documentation. It's very private conversations. I do not share it with the owners of the business. In fact, I explicitly tell them I'm under zero obligation, and I'm never going to tell you what your team say, because I need to get an understanding of what makes this business tick, where its perhaps strengths are, where its weaknesses are, and to understand the human element of it a lot better. Because I personally believe it's in that human element that you see I get a reflection of the client value. And then, as odd as that may seem, it's amazing when you talk to advisors and the team and all the layers of the business, you can get a really strong sense of what the client environment must feel like. And having done it so many times and seen all different models across this industry, and I'm not saying I can, get it perfect every single time, but I do get a very, very strong sense. So doing that is a key part of it. And then we go back into numbers again.
Sorry, I feel like that again is where your trained investigator really comes through.
I've had some in tears. I've had some a bit worried. I did find, Fraser, I have to say, in I Deliver, I proudly caused the sacking of an advisor, 1 out of 190 that I've seen in this industry, or 200, who was a genuine crook. And on the very first day we came in, by the end of the day, that person was gone. And it came about because of the questioning. And I'm fairly obsessive about it. I never ask a question that ends in a yes or a no. It is always who, what, why, when, where, how. That's and the reason for that is my training, and it's you get people to speak, you get people to talk, and as I said, you get a really strong sense of connection then. And this particular individual, I don't want to hone in on it, of course, and waste time, but that was a prime example of a person that shouldn't have been in this industry, and it's a reason that these intrusive regulations are imposed upon everyone. But the 190 or 200 other advisors I've spoken with, it's been such a privilege. They are so damn awesome. They annoy me at the same time because they limit their value all the time. And the only way to let that really unravel, and that's where it does, is you listen to their stories about the great advice moments they have achieved for their clients. And when they say stuff to me like, I don't do much for this client, Rob, or, they're really easy to service, I never accept that, which is a bit like back in the old criminal days. I never accepted a bloke who turns around and I've caught him almost red-handed. He said, "No, I didn't do it." Well, okay. Well, I'm going to work out and make you trip yourself up. Whoops, I shouldn't have said that. I'm going to work out a way through questioning to get you to tell me what I need. I know is the case. Anyway, so that bit's so important.
So number one is team. The second step is numbers.
is absolutely coming back in about understanding first the elasticity of the service proposition, pairing that then and understanding client profiles. Now, the odd thing about client profiles is, people often say, clients, they need superannuation advice, or they need pension advice or investment advice or whatever. And everyone sort of tends to stop there or don't go too much further. We want to go much further. We want to understand profiles, not how much money someone has, but the type of client profile they are. And the way that we unpack some of that is through questioning around the reasons that they came to advice in the first place. Why did they come to the business in the first place? Was there something missing? Was there something lacking? Did they have hopes that they perhaps couldn't do themselves? Is there a financial literacy issue? Is there a lack of time issue? Is there a financial succession issue or financial philanthropy issue that they want to pursue? That bit needs to be unpacked so much, and yet it's too much left off the table. But so we want to understand that. So understanding the client profiles is that next stage with the numbers again.
Yep.
Then we go into the next phase of building their initial pricing framework. And in some firms, we've actually done, we're up to version 9 on one firm. It takes time. It really does, because if we ignore the client profiles, or we just take the extreme end of client profiles, we're going to miss the core group of clients that every business looks after. And the presumption, and it's a reasonable one, is that same client profiles will come to the business at some point. The extreme ends we can deal with, but they shouldn't dictate the pricing framework, because it'll distort everything. So we spend a lot of time around pulling all that together, presenting that to the business. Then we go into a testing phase. So we take all the advisors behind the analysis of how we got to where we got to. We talk to them about targeting profit, a simple proposition of actually targeting profit. Now, not all advisors are owners of a firm. They don't often know that. But in our world, the firms we work with have been so brilliant in saying they're exposing themselves and saying, we want you to know everything, advisors. If you're not owners, we want you to come in behind the curtain. And I ask them that permission. Can you let me take them in so they can understand the why here, so that they feel connected to the process, they feel connected to the pricing validation piece that's so important, and so that when they're talking to clients, it becomes something that they innately believe in, and it's not something they're just going, gee, I'm going to have to tell you what the fee is, and I'm making a fortune, or I don't believe it. So we do a lot of work around that. So that's sort of phase 3. Phase 4 is coaching. Now, we actually take advisors on a journey. So we actually script write for them the conversation they have with their end client for a couple of things. It's not for the client, Fraser. The client gets it's overwhelming, our analysis and performance to date and everything we track. And as you know, we track every single individual client here. We're not talking stuff that's fluffy. We know exactly the movement of every single one of the 8,000 clients that have gone through this process. So we know the success rate of presenting to clients. We know what they value. We know that 2 to 3% of every firm we've worked with, pretty much 2 to 3% of the clients have left because of this process. And you know why they've left? Not because of the price. They've left because of value. And that's a hard thing. And I say it at the outset to every firm. Listen, I'm going to tell you some good news first. 78% of your clients are going to sign the paperwork in the meeting straight away when you present it, irrespective of the type of change in the fee. Now, don't forget, fees come down too in our world as much as they go up. It's the process that determines the fee. But for those that go up, overwhelming numbers sign in. And why do they sign up straight away? They have no issue with it because, 1, they believed in the process that the advisor's just taken them through. 2, they see so much value in the practice. It's unquestionable to them. And that's that intangible value component. So they don't have an issue. They don't believe they've been hoodwinked into something, and they believe they're getting tremendous value. But a reality is a small percentage won't, and just will leave. And so that's a fact. But overwhelming, they don't. So we show the advisors how to have a conversation with a client in a structured way to introduce a really tough topic. And I'm surprised at how many firms actually haven't modified their fees or had a tough fee conversation with clients. And yet we now have to do that every 12 months. We've got to reset things. So the education side is huge on supporting the advisors to have these challenging conversations by giving them a structured format that is believable, is clear, is so absolutely transparent to the client. The client sees everything. And we simply believe that once that happens, that transparency is absolutely brilliant and everyone sort of lines up to it and there's no ambiguity and there's nowhere to hide, absolutely nowhere to hide. So we teach them how to handle objections that might come up and just how to get out of a situation if need be. But perhaps the thing I'm most important about is we teach them how to position their value accurately. And this has been a real problem of ours for mine personally, I wanted to solve for years, is that I ask an advisor, tell me what you say to your clients, and tell me how you talk to me if I'm a new client. And too often advisors constrict their value by saying 3 to 5 things typically. Look after their goals and objectives. We invest your money for you. We'll look at asset allocation. We're going to look at tax as well for you, and we're going to help you navigate. Fantastic. But it doesn't actually tell me what an advice business does on a monthly basis and why I'm paying this fee that could be $50,000 at one end or $4,000 or $2,000 at another. What is it that financial planning practices do for clients? So part of what we're doing is actually unpacking that completely and giving the advisors a broader conversation with the blinkers off so that they don't get trapped in constricting value. Because when you huddle around those 3 or 4 or 5 things, you actually tend to pull psychologically, the price down. And in fact, a lot of advisors then will say to me, and a lot of younger advisors will see a fee a client's currently paying and go, Rob, I don't believe in that fee right now. And you'll ask them, well, they don't know. You'll ask them how much money is the business making on that client. And even an owner with 30 years experience, Fraser, has no idea really. I don't know what I'm making on that $12,000 fee or that $8,000 fee. I could be making a lot, could be making nothing. I could be giving it away. This isn't about ramping fees up. It isn't about, in fact, a lot of what we do is promote pro bono work and discounted work for those Australians who are struggling. But there's got to be a reason for doing that. You've got an economic business here. So, I've waffled on. I know I've covered a lot of things here. I apologise, but I'm trying to give you a sense. And phase 4, bang, we start. It's implementation. And that could take 3 to 4 months just to get to that first implementation from the start. And I make no apology for it because all of that work gets done in that time to get everyone ready, get the business ready, get the structure of the conversations ready, the paperwork ready, get the advisors fit and ready to go for it. And then it's a progressive implementation according to the review cycle of the business. And all existing clients are moved, and then they can also deal with their new clients coming through. And it means that within 12 to 15 months, the whole business has been completely reimagined and transitioned at a financial framework level.
Yeah, I really love that. I love the structure. I know that there is definitely a process in the advisors themselves having that belief in this is the correct structure.
Yep.
And often those first few conversations are the hardest. So to be able to have those first few conversations in a structured format that take place before you're actually going to a client, I think it's pretty incredible. So Rob, that's a really, really great process for financial advisors. I imagine this articulating the true value in financial advice. Do you want to give us a bit of a sneak insight into what you might say? And is it different for every firm, or do you have a standard belief?
It's very different for every firm. And I suppose that's the first thing to demystify here. Even though we're all financial planners and we largely deliver the same thing, cost structures, profit structures, history, everything is cost-based. Everything is so different. But at the core of financial planning, right, and this is my belief in unpacking services, we know that there is a minimum of 12 different service areas or expense areas that are required to service a client, no matter the profile. That's the minimum. We've got some firms that goes up to 24. And it's in that unpacking their capability, their qualification, how far they can extend into the advice range. And that becomes value then, right? That becomes their proposition. It becomes the scope of what they're capable of servicing. And often it's a surprise to them to actually see that laid out structurally and functionally, and then for their clients to actually see that when those clients are reflected against those same set of service areas that the business is qualified to do. But when it comes to positioning, and we had a situation where an advisor who was 25 years advisor, Fraser, a really experienced guy, a client came in, the Peloton process or the iDeliver process was delivered to the client. The client didn't say anything in the meeting around consenting to the change in the fee. The fee was moving from, I think, around $8,000 to about 12 or 13 or something like that, around $4,000 or $5,000. That's a reasonable increase. It's certainly not the biggest. It's certainly not the smallest. It's a reasonable one. And the client wrote an email straight away when they got home. The client was actually a policeman, wife was a teacher, so they were quite knowledgeable people, experienced people. And the client wrote a simple thing back and said, listen, I don't necessarily object. You actually explained everything quite well, really well. I don't object to what you've just delivered to me. But before I hit the button and consent to it, what do you actually – you've told me I have to pay a monthly fee and it's part of it, and I've seen that before. But what do you actually do for me on a monthly basis? Now, the advisor then rang me. It was interesting because he said, Rob, I got this email and that's what the client said. And I said, well, you've been an advisor longer than I've been in business. So what was your response? And he again sort of clustered around those 5 or 6 areas. So I said to him, look, if it's all right, I'd like to respond to that client through you, of course. And I'd like to tell the client exactly what goes on in a financial planning practice to service a client, which in my world equates to the value of advice, right? So I did. And I actually listed for this client 15 different areas that their monthly fee contributes. Profit is one of them. So the final one was profit margin. And the client came back once he saw everything, and it was all laid out in the same way that it was presented to him, but just with a bit more detail. And the client said he finally understood, because he actually thought my needs are quite simple and, oh, what do you guys do? I only see you once a year or twice a year and blah, blah, blah. But that's not what you pay a fee for once or twice a year. You actually pay it for this ongoing thing that has to occur. And it was just through, I suppose, peeling back those layers that it makes sense. And that now has become a little bit of and it changes for every firm. It has to, because each firm is a little bit different in where they go, and each client is a bit different in terms of what they need. But the core structure of that is something that I'm passionate about. And it's something when I train advisors now and I send them and say to them, you could put this on your website if you want, and they want to use it because it actually is the fullest example of what actually goes on in a financial planning practice and why a client should pay a fee. And the crazy thing is, the advisors, especially the ones coming in, go, wow, I didn't even realise this. I didn't realise it. You're right. This is the areas that we're doing. These are the areas that touches even advisor training, even the compliance and regulatory thing. All of that, we've made sure it's quite clear and explicit so that there is no ambiguity and that part of the fee goes toward this, just as it is that specific need for that specific client which needs to be dealt with. And a lot of it is around that intangible value piece. So we found out the reason why this policeman and his wife needed advice. There was a couple of reasons. One was a financial literacy one. Not that they were uneducated or anything. It's just there'd never been an interest. They always came back to the firm and asked more and more and more about things because they needed more understanding. They requested more time. They needed more meetings. That was part of their DNA. They wanted more attention because they couldn't quite grasp some of the concepts. So we built that in for them. Now, there was another client. The next one that came through was an accounting partner of a tax partner of a firm, of one of the big 4 accounting firms here in Melbourne, and absolutely has bucket loads of knowledge, but had no time. So there was a time-based engagement that we were factoring in, and the importance of time and getting organised. This is what advice is about. It's about understanding those initial needs, desires, gaps, if you want to call it, and actually making sure that you're pairing your value to that. Because the minute you do, part of the fee, we say for every single client, and this is in the education of the advisors, is clients are investing in themselves. And my level of investment that I need to make is different from someone else based on my experience and where I'm at in my stage of life. But the minute you connect me that I'm investing in myself and my family's future, and it just changes sometimes this thing of, hey, I've got these, I'm going to try and screw the fee down. We've had clients just constantly want to test their advisor. They're only testing them, right? And they're putting on them. And I've heard advisors go, oh, look, perhaps we might be able to do a little bit with the fee. And I stop them and go, the minute you say that, all you're doing is lowering your own profit. So do you want to do that for that particular client? Do they deserve it? Do they fit a category that you should be discounting them? Have they got any right over any other client? You're eating into your profit. So let's get confidence about what we do. Let's know it's valuable. If the client doesn't believe it's valuable, that's their right. They're not a client. But if they do, they're investing in themselves, and then there's also these cost areas that they must pay to stay. It's as simple and as logical as that, but the conversation and framework and the pricing model, Fraser, has not to this day, as far as I'd like to say, it hasn't been structured that way that you can have that type of conversation fluidly, honestly, openly, transparently, and not budge from it.
Yep.
Which is the important point here.
Exactly right. Thank you for that. And speaking of fees and valued, are you happy to talk about how you charge and your fees?
Yeah, 100%. So the iFocus is $15,000 plus GST, but occasionally it depends on the type of firm, depends on what we find. We can provide a bit of a discount to that. We've gone higher, we've gone lower, but it takes us roughly between 60 to 80 man hours to put together an iFocus. Some firms are very complex. Some firms have got MDA, managed account structures that need some unpacking. That might take a bit longer, but we base it on that. And our standard fee has been around $15,000, but we move between the ranges to deal with it. As far as iDeliver is concerned, the engagement at iDeliver is somewhat different. It's a minimum of 400 hours. Even for a single advice practice, I get this a lot. we work just as much with, and we've got plenty of those, through to we're working to probably 1,300, 1,400 hours with a firm with 9 advisors at the moment. And it's a time-based thing. So we charge a minimum fee to engage Peloton at $80,000 for iDeliver spread over 24 months. And I suppose if I can just get to the topic right, and I was told this, Fraser, when I first started the business. They said, Rob, back then we were charging $5,000 for an iFocus and $20,000 for iDeliver. And they said, a couple of people I trusted, mentors, said, advisors won't pay. There's no way. They're used to getting handouts. They won't pay for that. That's a $5,000, let alone 20, let alone 30. Well, we have pretty much zero. I don't have a problem with selling the fee because it's an investment, phrase. It actually is the easiest thing to do. And I know it sounds large and I respect that, but it's what you got to pay for what you get. And the return on that is phenomenal. I don't think we've got a firm yet that within the first 7 months hasn't actually covered already that Peloton fee that's amortized over the period for them. I haven't seen a firm yet that's actually had to budget for this even. It does self-pay. But I'd like to think it's more than that. It's an investment. And if you don't want to invest in it, don't. If you want to invest in it, see it as an investment. The return is very, very clear, and we do a lot of cash flow projections for the firm. We show them exactly when it's going to pay you back, and it dwarfs the impact. I had a firm recently. I'll give you a very simple example. We presented an iFocus to them. Sadly, before we got there, they had just bought $400,000 worth of recurring fees. It cost them $1.1 million. It was about 2.25 roughly recurring. We identified in their business a minimum of $435,000 of ongoing revenue from existing clients, no additional cost base, all clients known to the firm, and that would have cost them, I think, about $150,000 to get Peloton in to do it. I think they had 4 advisors, something like that, 4 advisors. Yeah, I don't think I have to say much further than that. I think it actually explains it. What they did was they bought themselves an extra 300 clients. They had to put on more people, clients they didn't even know. Problems in the, as we found out subsequently, the service issues of some of those clients, history they don't really know. And I'm not against acquisitions. I've done 38 transactions now, buy and sell. I'm after fix your house first, for goodness sake. In this world, you've got to fix yourself first. You'll look at the transaction totally differently then. You'll be able to profile it over your new framework and you'll be able to get it right from day one rather than just piling on problems. And they're expensive problems too. I'm not against it. I just think it needs to be done a bit better.
Yeah, you certainly sounds like, developing those foundations and securing those foundations within your own business before you bring on who knows what out of an existing book.
Spot on.
Rob, thanks so much for coming on and chatting to us today and going through your process. How can people reach out to you, get hold of you, contact you if they wanted to continue the conversation?
Firstly, thanks to you, Fraser, too, for reaching out and giving me this opportunity to talk about something I absolutely love and live it every day. So I want to say thanks to you and your community, 100%. Quite simply, email, so Peloton Partners, so the website www.pelotonpartners. Peloton is Peloton. Sometimes people Peloton. There's a biking analogy in there that I didn't get into, but anyway, so it's pelotonpartners.com.au. I've got a mobile. I'm happy to give that Fraser at any time. I don't know what the process is, but by mobile as well, through our LinkedIn, all sorts of avenues, and we'd be happy to chat to anybody and just have a conversation with them.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think with the powers of Google these days, Peloton Partners should be found, or yourself, Rob Jones, or especially on LinkedIn. I think you're pretty much linked into half the industry, so it shouldn't be too hard to find you.
Absolutely.
Rob, thank you so much for coming and sharing. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Fraser. Take care.